Hello, everyone. My name is Dion Green, son of Derek Fudge. My father, Derek Fudge, was murdered in the August 4th, 2019 mass shooting that occurred in Dayton, Ohio, that claimed the lives of 9 innocent people. Today, I'm just here with my attorneys and Lysandra speaking on behalf of the lawsuit that we are holding this company accountable for, and the pain that they gave to the families. And pretty much, I just wanted to just speak my heart and just say thank you for allowing me to be here to share my story and to share with the people the pain that we are still suffering since the shooting. Thank you.
Thank you, Dion. And with that, I'll introduce Lysandra James. Lysandra, if you'd like to speak.
Hi, my name is Lysandra James. I am the mother of Lois Oglesby, one of the victims of the mass shooting that occurred in Dayton, Ohio, the Oregon district. I'm here today in representation of my grandchildren, Hannah and Rain, who lost their mother on that day. I'm here because I guess for me, I want to make sure that the actions of all those that were responsible that day don't go unanswered for my grandchildren.
Thank you so much, Lysandra. And with that, I will turn things over to Ben Cooper. Ben, if you would like to speak.
Thanks, Liam. My name is Ben Cooper. I'm a partner at the law firm Cooper Elliott. And I want to first say that we are so very proud to represent Dion and Lysandra and their families, as well as the families of Logan Turner and Nicole Warren Curtis. I think it takes a lot of courage to stand up and put yourself out there. And these families have come together to fight for change. 2 years ago, it only took 30 seconds for a man to kill 9 people and wound 17 others, and that's because he had a 100-round magazine. Yesterday, on behalf of the families, we filed a lawsuit against the company that made and sold that 100-round magazine. We believe it's the first lawsuit in the country to focus on high-capacity magazines. Almost 60% of mass shootings involve high-capacity magazines. We see it over and over: Aurora, Newtown, Las Vegas, Parkland, and we saw it in Dayton. If the Dayton shooter did not have such a large capacity magazine, he would not have been able to inflict the damage that he did. No civilian needs a 100-round magazine. It's only useful for the military or mass shootings. They're incredibly dangerous, and the companies know that. And so through this lawsuit, the families are seeking accountability, and they want the companies to stop selling these dangerous products in dangerous ways. We are proud to represent these people and their families, and we've assembled an outstanding team of attorneys to bring this case, and we look forward to moving forward.
Thank you, Ben. And now I'll turn things over to Jonathan Lowy. John?
Thank you, and thank you all for attending here today. My name is Jonathan Lowy. I'm Chief Counsel at Brady. For over 40 years, Brady has been leading efforts to prevent the gun violence epidemic in America. We work in Congress, courts, and communities to make America a safer place. And for over 30 years, Brady has represented victims and survivors of gun violence, like Dion and Lysandra, as well as governments and communities, to seek civil justice and to hold companies accountable for their contributions to gun violence. Our work is aimed at protecting Americans' most fundamental right, the right to live. It has been my privilege to litigate cases as part of Brady for about 24 years. And in 30 plus years of gun violence prevention litigation in which Brady has been engaged, this is the first case, as Ben said, that is focused solely on the contribution of large capacity ammunition magazines to gun violence. Now, 2 years ago, as we know, a popular entertainment district in Dayton, Ohio, was transformed into a war zone. Dion's father, one of his best friends, died in his arms. 2 women, friends out for an evening, were gunned down in the prime of their lives. Children were left without mothers. Sons were left without fathers. Men and women from all walks of life were slaughtered. They did not sign up for battle. They just wanted to enjoy an evening out. 13 hours after or before the mass shooting in Dayton, a Walmart in El Paso, Texas, was turned into a war zone. 46 people were shot, 23 were killed. A week before that, the Gilroy Garlic Festival in California was turned into a war zone. 14 people were shot, 3 were killed. In recent years, Americans have been subjected to military-style mass assaults in a restaurant in Thousand Oaks, California, a high school in Parkland, Florida, a church in Sutherland Springs, Texas, a music festival in Las Vegas, Nevada, a nightclub in Orlando, an elementary school in Newtown, Connecticut, a Meet Your Representative get-together in Arizona, and on and on and on. This is America. No other country tolerates its citizens being so repeatedly subjected to mass assaults and mass slaughter when they're just trying to live their lives. This is unacceptable. There is a reason why so many places in America are being transformed into war zones. And that's because there are companies that are recklessly marketing tools of war to the public. Every mass shooting that I just mentioned, and many, many more, involved a large capacity ammunition magazine that enables shooters to fire many, many rounds without reloading. The gun industry has long known that large capacity magazines are not needed by law-abiding gun owners. Over 20 years ago, famed gun manufacturer of Sturm Ruger, Bill Ruger, said, and I quote, "No honest man needs more than 10 rounds." For 10 years, it was illegal in America to make magazines that were more than 10 rounds. The Dayton shooter who turned Dayton into a war zone and inflicted such untold damage to these families used a 100-round magazine, 10 times the capacity of what was allowed under federal law for 10 years. That 100-round magazine was made and sold by the defendants in this case. Equipped with an assault weapon, a magazine like that can transform any place in America into a war zone in seconds. In our complaint, we allege that defendants' sale and marketing of 100-round magazines is negligent, that is unreasonable and unlawful, and that these families have a right to hold the defendants accountable. We are asking for defendants to pay appropriate damages to these families, and we are asking a court to enter an injunction to make them stop. It is a privilege to represent Dion, Lysandra, and the other courageous victims and survivors who've channeled their grief into action for only one reason, so that no other family will endure what they have had to endure. We look forward to proving our case in court. Thank you.
Thank you, John, and thank you all. I'll now open things up for questions. I see Alex Ebert had asked one in the chat. For others unfamiliar with the format, you can use the raise hand function in Zoom, and it will be entered, your question, your query will be entered into a queue. I can unmute you and then you can ask your question. So I see there's a few in the queue already. We'll kick off with the one Alex had sent to the chat. So for one of the attorneys, he's asked on whether this is the first time a maker of a high capacity magazine has been sued due to the manufacturer making of the magazine. The question being if it is truly the first because manufacturers have been sued in the past. Alex, if you would like to elaborate on that, if you can use the raise hand function, I can unmute you at some point. Oh, yes, sorry. Let me unmute you now.
Hey, good morning, and thank you so much for talking about this case. When we use words like first, we just want to be careful about what we're saying. If there was similar, allegations brought in complaints against these defendants or similar defendants before in broader litigation, we don't want to, improperly indicate that this is a first. So if you could elaborate on that and say what distinguishes this from other litigation, that would be extremely helpful. Thank you.
Sure. Thanks, Alex. To our knowledge, this is the first lawsuit that's focused solely on the marketing and manufacture and sale of high-capacity magazines. So there have been suits that have been against a number of defendants, makers and sellers of the gun, in some cases the body armor and ammunition and magazine and the seller and maker of magazines. So there have been those sorts of cases. We're not aware of any that have been focused solely on the magazine. And I couch it as, that we're aware of, because I'm just being honest. You can't say honestly that of every single lawsuit that's been filed in every state court, because nobody knows that unless they've looked at the docket of every state in the country, which I don't think anyone's ever done. But having been in this business for over 30 years at Brady, most likely if we don't know about a suit like this, we're pretty confident that it has not happened.
Thank you, John. Alex, if you had a follow-up, I can take you out of the queue and move on to someone else.
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you.
Sure. All right. Tom Bosco at WSYX, I'm going to allow you to talk, so you should be able to unmute and ask your question.
Thank you. I'm assuming you can all hear me. Tell me, why do you think that politically that this could change now, if anything? And I know this is a lawsuit, not an effort to actually change the law, but politically, it doesn't seem like there has been the political will to change laws or to come down against gun makers and the makers of these kinds of devices. Why do you think now is the time?
Well, I mean, this is not a political action. This is a lawsuit, and it will be decided by judges and juries applying the law. In fact, in not just with guns, but with many, many public health and social problems, lawsuits have led the way to reforms where judges and juries applying the law have held companies and industries accountable. Sometimes that has led to legislative action, tobacco, opioids, the car industry, and many others. So the key thing is this is not a political action, and so I mean it's a separate conversation, the politics of guns. I'd rather focus on the litigation that we're talking about here.
I'd add a couple points to Tom. One is I would say is that many of our clients have been trying to advocate to get legislatures to act in order for there to be statutes and laws on the books to address these sorts of things. And in some instances, a lawsuit is the only meaningful tool available when a legislature won't act. And that is certainly, one of the reasons for some why they feel it's even necessary to bring this lawsuit in the first place. And the other thing I'd say is that there are some of our clients who will tell you that that they are not anti-Second Amendment people. They own guns, they hunt, but what everyone can and should be able to agree on is that no one needs a 100-round capacity magazine. It is only useful by the military or in mass shootings, and to transform, as John said, places into war zones. And so I do think the fact that this is focused on 100-round magazines in particular allows there to be a much wider group of people who say, yeah, why would anyone need that?
Thank you both. Tom, if you didn't have any follow-ups, I'll move on to the next question. Great. I'm now going to unmute Tino Bovenzi. Tino, you should be able to unmute and ask your question.
Yes, thank you. I see you guys can hear me. Dion and Lysandra, thanks for taking the time to do this. I know this time of year is really, really tough. I mean, as is every day that you guys experience. So thank you for being here. But for the lawyers here, you're trying to get 100-round magazines or capacity magazines to stop being sold in this lawsuit. Is that correct? And then also, what's the goal of changing the limit of capacity for this? Could you just go in a little deeper of, what the plan is for that? Because what's to say somebody carries 250-round magazines instead of a 100-round magazine? Could you just maybe differentiate, that for us to understand a little bit better?
Sure. I'll start, and then Ben, you can jump in. I mean, in this lawsuit, we are seeking what the law allows and what we believe the law entitles these families to, and that is damages for the injuries that they've suffered and an injunction to prevent the defendants from continuing to sell the way they have been selling these 100-round magazines. That is not a order to transform the law of what magazines are allowed and what magazines aren't. There are very specific facts in this case, and the court is going to be focused on them, which is the marketing, sales, design practices of these defendants. So I think you have to be careful when you're talking about, this is an effort to, stop all magazines under a certain capacity. That just isn't the way a lawsuit works. It's about the conduct of these particular defendants, which includes a number of things that they did, which we believe were wrongful. And that includes their decision to market, to make 100-round magazines, to market them to the general public, to do so without any reasonable restrictions or conditions, to allow and even to encourage in some ways that people use internet sellers to obtain those 100-round magazines, to not screen for who would be an appropriate user of a 100-round magazine. It's those and those allegations we go into in detail in the complaint, and we'll develop more in the case. So I don't know, Ben, I don't know if you had more you want to say on that.
No, the only thing I'd add, Tina, is as John said, with a lawsuit, we can only accomplish so much, and we have to work on the facts that are before us. I think the question you raise is one of a line drawing problem. What's the number to ban? And that is a question for the legislatures to address, and they should address it. What we're trying to do is, and what these families are trying to do, is use the tools available to them to do what they can as private citizens and as victims and survivors of this massacre to take some action.
Thank you both. Tino, did you have any follow-up?
No, you guys can move forward.
Thank you.
And let me just add one more thing. I mean, line drawing is always a problem. It seems like in the gun space, people take it more seriously than they do in other spaces. I mean, there's someone could make a good argument that, why did I get the speeding ticket for driving 56? Are you saying if I was driving 54, I wouldn't have gotten a ticket? The answer to that is yes, you wouldn't have gotten a ticket. And I suppose you could present studies so that there's how much of a difference is it driving 54 versus 56. That's the case in virtually every single law you can think of. There is a line drawn, and one can make arguments as to why should the line be drawn in that particular space, and does it make sense if I move one inch on the other side? That doesn't stop us from making laws. We recognize that lines have to be drawn. And, in this case, the only line that the court's going to have to deal with is a 100-round magazine to the general public sold in the way that these defendants did unreasonable and unlawful.
Thank you both. I believe Evan Millward has a question, so I will unmute you now. You should be able to ask your question.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate it. The sense I get from what you're saying is that there's obviously a direct action required out of the lawsuit, which is the injunction here. Then there's the damages, but is this also a symbolic thing? Because you're going after one company and this specific product. Am I clear on that? And then what is sort of the broader implication of that?
Well, I mean, I wouldn't say it's symbolic. I mean, these families are bringing action against the companies, the particular companies that caused their tragedies. Now, as I said, oftentimes litigation can be a leader in public discussion and ultimately to legislation. So I think it would be very appropriate for states and Congress to look at this and think about whether it should be legal to sell 100-round magazines to the general public. And should it be legal to sell 75-round magazines to the general public? And should they draw a line? And I think they should. I think law enforcement generally thinks they should. I think most experts think that they should. But that's, maybe another positive consequence from this litigation.
Evan, I also think that if companies know that they can be held financially responsible for the deaths they cause from selling dangerous products in a dangerous way, then I think the companies that make and sell these products will think very seriously about whether they will continue making and selling them, or whether they'll continue making them and selling them in the reckless ways that they do now. And so in terms of broader implications, I do think that a successful result in this case will have ripple effects throughout the market.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate it.
Thank you both. John Bettle had a question, so I will unmute you now. John, you should be able to ask your question.
Great, thank you. Just for clarity's sake here, currently one of the shooter's friends, Ethan Colley, he is in a federal prison as so far the only person charged in connection with this investigation. And while the FBI says that he did not have any prior knowledge of what Connor Betts was planning on doing that night, he was the one the FBI said to buy that 100-round magazine for him. Just to be clear, this lawsuit does not name Colley as a defendant. This is just focused on the company for the damages and this injunction?
That's correct.
Thank you.
All right. Were there any other questions or follow-up questions? I don't believe there's any more in the queue. If you've spoken previously but had a follow-up, you can actually unmute and ask your question.
Oh, all right. Hey guys, it's Tino again from Spectrum News 1. I just wanted to figure out what the timeline is for this lawsuit and how it will move forward from this point. Obviously, with it being filed yesterday, I know there's a lot of steps that have to go through. So just so our viewers understand how this should move.
Well, the next immediate steps are for us to formally serve copies of the complaint onto the defendants, including the South Korean company that's named in the lawsuit. After that, the defendants have a certain period of time to formally respond in the litigation. And it will be up to them at that point how they choose to respond. I anticipate that they will file what's called a motion to dismiss, which is where they ask the court to throw out the case right out of the gate for legal reasons. And we believe that would not have any merit, but it would not surprise me if that's the path that these companies initially try to go down.
And I just add that the other possibilities, they file what's called an answer, and then there's discovery.
Good morning, everybody. This is Alex Ebert again with Bloomberg. Are there any gun sort of manufacturer or marketer shield laws in Ohio that have led you to frame the case the way you have? And then if you could talk more broadly, looking at toxic torts, especially, you see litigation stepping in where government has not done so yet. And the intransigence that we've seen at the federal and state level around, regulating weapons that harm lots of people at once. Could you get into how you sort of see your role in shifting the private marketplace where government is currently not moving? Thank you.
Well, first off, to first part of your question, we're not going to go into litigation strategy or, predicting what defendants may raise and how we'd respond. That will play itself out in court. But, as we've been talking about, litigation can, and I think in this case should lead the way to broader reforms of the sale of large capacity magazines. To be frank, Dion, Lysandra, and the other victims and survivors who brought this suit have shown far more courage by bringing this case than many in Congress. And they've suffered a lot more. I think it would be welcome for people in Congress to pay attention to the voices of real people who've suffered real losses from this industry, and to think, how should they protect Americans? It is unconscionable that many in Congress and state legislatures do not raise a finger when they see fellow Americans being slaughtered in virtually every activity one can imagine where people gather to enjoy life. And yet they do lift much more than a finger to protect the gun industry that profits from that slaughter. That is unconscionable, and hopefully when they hear the powerful voices of Dion, Lysandra, and others, they will act to make Americans more safe.
Nothing to add.
Thank you. And I believe Chloe Murdoch has a question. So Chloe, you should be able to unmute and ask your question now.
Thank you. I'm Chloe Murdoch with WYSO. Ben, you said earlier that you were hoping for a successful ripple effect throughout the market. If you could be more specific in what you hope for, and then also, what kind of relief are you hoping to give to your plaintiffs throughout this lawsuit, other than the ones that are clearly defined in the lawsuit?
Sure. So what I meant by that was we know from past litigation that when companies realize that they face potential financial responsibility for death and injury caused by their unlawful conduct, they change that conduct. And so part of the hope is that with a successful result, other manufacturers of 100-round magazines, other high-capacity magazines, will think very seriously about whether it makes financial sense for them to continue to market and sell and make these very dangerous products in the marketplace. In terms of things beyond the kind of specific relief asked in the complaint, as John has said, has laid out kind of what the complaint itself asks for and what is available under the law. I'll just say from my personal experience in representing people who have suffered horrible tragedies is that some folks can find this process to be therapeutic and also kind of give them strength and find be an avenue for their voice. And that is my hope for everyone we represent, and it is really my sincere hope for our clients in this case too, is that through this lawsuit, they're also able to get some additional answers about what happened and find some additional meaning in the process.
And I would just add to that in cases brought by Brady on behalf of victims and survivors, we've won over $60 million in verdicts and settlements. We've also won many reforms by gun companies that have agreed to change their business practices in very significant ways. There have also been companies that have had to get out of business, either because of the lawsuit or because of law enforcement response to information obtained during the lawsuit, or from insurance companies, basically recognizing that they were too great a risk to insure. We at Brady worked with Ben and other lawyers at their firm, Cooper Elliott, in another lawsuit, different sort of case that was successful and led to significant reforms of a major seller of guns. And we've seen that in other sorts of cases. So there is a tremendous potential for a lawsuit like this to create positive reforms.
Thank you.
Were there any other final or follow-up questions? Oh, I believe Chelsea Sick has a question. So Chelsea, you should be able to unmute and ask your question now.
Hi there, I'm Chelsea Sick. I'm a reporter in Dayton. And when we do stories like this, and I'm sure you have seen it as well, we often hear it's the person, not the gun, or in this case, the magazine. Even as this is playing right now, I've seen viewers on our Facebook page commenting that. Why do you think it's most important now to go after the company? Is this just a small piece of the puzzle?
Well, these companies are still in business. I mean, as was mentioned, you know, the person who bought this magazine is in prison. But unfortunately, there are many, many more people like him in America. And the man who engaged in this shooting, who nobody feels more strongly about the horrific acts that he took than Dion, Lysandra, the other families, and us who represent them. Nobody. Those people were customers of these defendants. And the fact is, these defendants would welcome many, many more customers just like them. And they will welcome them because they make money off them. This shooter needed the 100-round magazine in order to turn Dayton into a war zone. These defendants needed the shooter in order to make money. And that's the sad truth. And until you have the companies who supply these instruments of mass slaughter to change the way they do business, they will continue to do business and they will continue to supply their weapons of war, and we will see more and more places in America transformed into war zones.
Yeah, Chelsea, what I'd say is we hold these companies responsible because they did something dangerous too, and it led to 9 deaths. And sometimes the way I've been kind of thinking about it is, you know, in another context, imagine a nursing home that's understaffed. A nurse at that nursing home might do something negligent that leads to someone's death. But if she did that because she had worked 36 hours or there had been way too many patients or something else, that was a dangerous situation created by the nursing home. And the nursing home is responsible for that dangerous situation that also led to that death. And that's what happened here. The manufacturer of the 100-round magazine enabled the shooting at Dayton. And so they are responsible for these deaths as well.
Hey, very quickly, if I might follow up, it's Tom Bosco at ABC 6 in Columbus. This is being filed in Nevada just because that's where the company is based? Why do this in Nevada?
That is where the company is based. That's its headquarters.
Great, thank you all. If there were no other follow-ups, it doesn't look like there are any in the queue. We can wrap up. So before we conclude, I wanted to give Dion and Lysandra the opportunity to add anything or you know, finish and conclude. So Dion, I don't know if you had anything you wanted to say.
Yes, I just want to follow up. This lawsuit means a lot to me. The shooter us families don't got justice because he took the easy way out. So we need to hold this company accountable. And this not the beginning of my fight. Since my dad died in my arms that night, I've been advocating across the country, fighting against all type of laws, helping victims of crime. This just don't happen one day and it goes away. This is my lifetime. This is my life. Whether it's mental health and stuff like that. So people don't understand the effects that carries on after life. And that's why I created what I have created to help other survivors with the capacity to get mental health, because we're the ones still living here through the pain. You know, people see this one day and it's out their head the next. It don't happen with us. This is our life. This is our life. We don't see our families no more. We you know, it's a lot of pain. So I stay fighting and trying to create change, because as I tell other people, you don't want to feel this experience, because it's not a network that I chose to be in, but I'm in it. So I'm going to be the voice for the voiceless, and I'm going to stand tall, and I'm going to represent not just all the family members in Dayton, but across the country, and try to stop this from happening, because there's never a day where I don't feel the pain. Some days are better than the other, but it don't go away. So this means a lot to me, because we're opening the door. Now it's time to kick it off and try to create change. And whether I'm in the State House talking about it, I'm going to continue being a voice. I'm going to continue being in their ear till we get change, because they don't understand it, because they haven't experienced it. But once it happens to them, then they'll get alongside and want change. But till then, I'm not going to be quiet. I'm going to stand tall with a voice, and I'm going to just keep being in their ear and demanding change. And that's all I want to say. But this it don't end overnight. This is a lifetime. You know, I had to be there that night to watch my father die right beside me. And me not knowing how I didn't die, thinking my father only got shot once and it was 5 times. Then as I'm walking to the end of the street, I'm stepping over other bodies, because this man had a problem with himself or whatever, but he put our families in pain. We the one that's having to suffer. He's gone. He left. He took it out the easy way, but we're the one that's sitting here have to suffer and live. And for 2 years, I've been in the streets fighting, been in the State House fighting bills to advocate on mental health, to stand your grounds. And we still haven't went nowhere. We still haven't de-escalated nothing. All we have doing is escalate. Every day you turn on the news, it's gun violence, it's mass shootings. When is enough enough? Till it happens to them. And you know, all I can keep doing is sharing my heart to help heal other broken hearts. But until then, this means a lot to me in my heart, because just these lawyers, they gave me a sense of security, because man, I was calling around and places saying no. So I just had to accept what happened to our family and let this go. No. And then all of a sudden it just came, and everything just started forming together. So I feel confident that we can create change, because I'm going to keep talking loud and being loud till something changes. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Dion.
And Leon, before I don't know if Lysandra, did you have anything?
Yes, I wanted to, follow up with Dion. I totally agree. This is a long-term effect. My granddaughters were 7 and one was 2 months old at the time that her mother was murdered. She will never get to know her mother and how beautiful she was, neither one of them. And it's sad. I mean, as he said, it's really even more saddening to me that talking about mass shootings today is just like having a casual conversation. Something has to be done. I have, in fact, my granddaughter just 2 or 3 days ago was talking, it's that time of year again, her mother's anniversary of her death. And she's asking questions. She's counting the roses and asking how, Nana, how is this possible that one person could kill 9 people that fast? She needs answers. We need answers. Something has to be done. This is not the end. This is the beginning of this conversation.
Thank you, Lysandra. John, were you trying to add something?
Just Dion and Lysandra are true American heroes. And I hope all of you in the press recognize that, lift up their voices. If gun violence is going to be stopped in America, it's going to be because of Dion, Lysandra, and others like them.